Welcome, everyone, to the One More Game podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, Jeremy Culver, a.k.a. Darcy, and with me is the California Thirst Quencher, Pete Leja. Pete, how you doing, man?
It's Celebration Day, baby. 1 year anniversary for the One More Game podcast. As you can see with Jeremy's hat, I am much less festive, but I do have my Fear the Madness. We're rocking the Randy Savage, the Macho Man. Ooh, yeah.
Ooh,
We're ready to go. I already finished my beer. I already finished my libation. I would have another one, but I do want to go work out after this. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to pass, but that's okay because Jeremy, he's got my back. He's got his own.
He's got his own
alcoholic beverage.
Shout out to Pig's Mind Brewing Company in Machesney Park, Illinois, for their Happy Days. That's what it was called, but it is a blueberry festive beer that they make. So
I don't know if I've told you this. I went to recently. I went to a grocery store. Shit, I can't remember what it's called now. Anyway, I went to a place, a national chain, but they had Stone Cold IPA because El Segundo is around the area, and that's their brewery. So I had one. It was garbage. It was like water.
Really?
It was not good. I did not like it. Did not care for it in the slightest. I do feel kind of bad now because you went local brewery and I went Stella Artois. So I went a little more like national and stuff like that. But, other than that, the beer was good. The show, well, we'll get to the show, but it was at least fun hanging out in chat. It was fun hanging out with you. So, pretty good time.
Yeah, and we will get to that show, of course, all of the things that came out of that and just in general, our thoughts. And, of course, celebrating the 1 year anniversary of the One More Game podcast, all here up next. But as always, everybody, thank you so much for tuning in here to the One More Game podcast. This is a podcast that is centered around making sure you're informed about all the video game news happening around the world, whether it's Nintendo, Xbox, PlayStation, or PC. If there's news that you need to know about, we'll make sure that you know about it. When you're listening to this on your podcast service, make sure you hit the subscribe button or the follow button, depending on what your service offers. And if your podcast service allows reviews, please leave a 5-star review and tell everyone why you love the One More Game podcast, because we really enjoy bringing this to you each and every Friday. You guys are here witnessing this live in the recording, but we always post this on Fridays for our podcast services. If you'd like to be part of the show by asking a question or suggesting a topic for discussion, head on over to pressstartnews.net/one more game and fill out the submission form, and your submission could be used on the next episode or in this now and in the future. Hit some questions over in the chat box. I don't remember which direction I need to point, but wherever the chat box is, go put some things in there and we could potentially reference it or bring it up here in the discussion. But if this is your first time to the podcast, welcome to the podcast. I hope you enjoy your listen and I hope you enjoy your stay. If you are returning, you already know what it is. We start off every single podcast talking about what we've been playing lately. So, Pete, what have you been playing lately?
So, I bought and downloaded Soldiers from Fanatical using your affiliate link. So I hope you got a little bit of kickback on that. And it's been fun. It's a Metroidvania game. We talked about it last week. That was where most of my time went this week. I didn't get a whole lot of playing time. Hopefully that'll change, at least for the next week, a little bit because the way my hours work out at my job. So I'll be able to play a few things. I do plan on playing Persona Golden. I'm kind of bummed out. I kind of forgot about Meteor World Actor Badge and Dagger. I have the demo downloaded. I wanted to try that out, so hopefully I still get a chance to. We'll find out about that, but I got a couple things lined up. I definitely want to give a shot. But I talked about Soldiers last week. I've downloaded it now. Nice to know how you can save the game. That's a little bit more helpful. It's better than it was last week. And yeah, I'm having a lot of fun with it. If you like Metroidvania games, you'll probably like this. I wouldn't say there's anything unique about it so far or jarring about it that I would say like, hey, this is something you got to try. But I mean, it's a fun game. So if you're looking for a new Metroidvania game, give it a shot.
That's cool to have. Now, the fact that you did know that how to save it this time obviously changes things. And you're going to hear typing in the background because I realized I told you that I had posted about the podcast going live. And then apparently I never hit send. So we don't have
way
that
to go.
But I am doing it right now. And just hit post. So let's see if that goes through. Yeah, now it goes through.
Hey, we're still working out the kinks. Along with all the other things we're celebrating, this is our first podcast we're airing live on YouTube. So
I did hit post, but it was not loading up for me. Okay.
I was about to say, I thought I don't know what I linked then, because Facebook and Twitter, I like retweeted.
Well, there you go. And on my end, I was having your Summer Game Fest issues. It was not showing that there, so I was like, oh, I guess I didn't hit live.
Womp womp.
Womp womp. But anyway, so going back real quick, because I don't remember if you actually answered my question. So now that you know how to save, has things felt a little bit different when it comes to the game, feeling like now knowing that you actually can stop when you need to versus where you were feeling in the demo? As you said, you were like, oh, I didn't know how to save, so I just kind of was like, hope I don't die.
Yeah, it's definitely a little different. I got a lot deeper, and so I felt like I used a few more of the game mechanics, which was kind of cool. Leveled up my character a little bit. I got a couple of things, like I got my character and ability, like a fire abilities. So now it made my character, like I picked the scout again, which was just like the generic like soldier dude with a sword and shield. But the character gets to swing a sword now, but it's like fire enhanced. So like there's a couple of areas that are blocked by spider webs that you can't normally destroy, but now that my character has fire attacks, it burns the webs. So I got a few more secret extra areas. I guess that's the thing that's probably the newest thing to me now. There's a lot of if you don't like this part of it, it's probably something you should avoid in terms of soldiers. You should probably just avoid the game then. There's a lot of backtracking through, like, oh, hey, there's this there's this one part where you get bombs that blow up like weak walls, and then when the game starts, you'll go through areas that have like weaker walls and stuff like that, but you can't do anything about it, so you got to backtrack. Now, the save points, they have several of these throughout the game, and also give you fast travel, so you can like teleport between save points. So like it's not like you have to like go back all over again through the entire level to like go back to the start. You just kind of like jump between save points, but there is still a little bit like, hey, I did this whole area and now there's like a small little spot that I missed because my character couldn't get there before and now I can reach it. And that part's I'm not going to say it's like my favorite part, especially when you do it like several times in a row. But in general, I've enjoyed it. It's been a nice little kind of like, especially with the save points, it's like kind of one of those games where I feel like I could pick up for like 20, 30 minutes and then just kind of put down and then come back to it later. So that part's been kind of cool.
Well, that's good. For those that are watching on youtube.com/pressstart28, I spilled my drink already, so I had to go get.
Man, you've been drinking too much. Are you sure that was the only one? Did you have like an Irish mocha? Like you have some whiskey in that mocha earlier?
It's one of those. It's one of those things where you think that your desk is larger than it is when you start trying to do a bunch of things at once. And as I was trying to reach over and grab something, I quickly knocked it over. So yeah, I had to go grab a towel to pick that up. But
it's live. Anything that can happen will happen on live TV.
Exactly, and that's why we just roll with the punches. For myself, I played a bunch of different games. As always, I feel like every episode I'm saying that because, as I told you before, I've kind of been in this funk lately where I feel like I want to play a specific game, but I don't own said game. And then, of course, from there, it just leads me to going, well, maybe this game will scratch the itch. Maybe this game will scratch the itch. So this week I played Evil Dead, the game, which was a lot of fun. I had a blast. I played the tutorial, and I've played one of the missions, basically, that you can unlock extra skins with. And then I played one actual match, and we got really far in that actual match. We got actually really close to completing and winning before we finally died as we were trying to take out I don't even remember what they're called, but they basically look like the hooded figures from Harry Potter. But we were in the process of taking them down, and we finally died. I played that for a little bit. I played some Deathloop this week. Enjoyed what I played of Deathloop. Deathloop, if many may remember, I loved that game. Like when it was announced, was really looking forward to it. I bought it shortly after it came out. Got it actually for like $8 or something like that, and just hadn't actually opened it. It was still in the plastic wrap. So then this week, because like I said, I was in this funk, I popped it in, played a little bit of it, and that was kind of it. It's been a very busy week for me, so I didn't get a whole lot of extra gaming in, but those were the two big ones. I went to go play a little bit of Ghostwire Tokyo, another one that I was really excited for but didn't pick up, but I did not get a chance to actually dive into it too much. So we'll see my thoughts on that when I get another
Any of those
shot
get close to scratching the itch that you were mentioning?
I would say Evil Dead the game got closer to scratching the itch than anything. It's so like the game that I've been wanting to pick up for quite a while now, and it started with us talking about our underappreciated games, has actually been Resonance of Fate. And there's a 4K HD remaster, and I have been wanting to get it, but I have so many games that I haven't, one, played, and two, there's been opportunities where that game was on sale and I didn't pick it up. And so like part of me wants to go buy it, but also part of me is like, just wait till it goes on sale again. But it hasn't gone on sale since I talked about it. And so it's been very tough. I just cannot decide what I want to play for that reason. So we'll get to it eventually. We'll get to something, and something will catch my attention that I'll stick around long enough to fully finish. And it's not to say the games I've been playing aren't good. I like the games that I've been playing, but it's just like with anything, when like you play something, you're like, okay, I'm enjoying this, but it's not quite what I want. That's what happens. And I'm like, okay, well, like, what am I in the mood for? And I switch, and it's like, oh, that's not quite it either, you know? So we'll go from there. But we've been talking about what we've been playing lately for quite a bit. So it's time to move on to our next topic and our topics of the show. So those that we have here for the podcast, this is normally where I would list off a bunch of things. But because, one, it is the 1 year anniversary of the One More Game podcast, and two, today was Summer Game Fest, we have only two topics to talk about, and that is recapping our thoughts and discussions around Summer Game Fest and what we just saw, as well as reminiscing about the 1 year anniversary of the One More Game podcast. And those that are watching here on youtube.com/pressstart28 are seeing me wear this really awesome blue first birthday hat, as well as having balloons in the background. So those that are listening on the podcast, go check that out. Yeah, I did go all out. I was going to get more, but I decided this was enough money spent already. So I'm not gonna go for more after that. But Pete, we just got through watching Summer Game Fest Kickoff live over on the official Summer Game Fest account. And I'm not going to precurse this with anything so I can get your truest thoughts that you can bring to me. But after you saw what just took place, how do you feel that went? If you could sum it up in a sentence or a few words first and then go into detail, what would you say?
If I could sum it up in a sentence, the sentence would be Geoff Keighley didn't lie. Yeah, he mentioned recently, curtail your expectations. And if you were expecting something massive, something major, unless one of these games that were shown were something you were really into and really looking forward to, you're probably kind of whelmed with this one. We gave our scores of like our hype levels when we started. I saw some chat. What up, Calwoo? Good to see you. Cobalt, see you in chat. Thanks for coming over. So we gave our scores. We gave it kind of a similar score. It was like 6.5. We saw in chat during our live stream, our co-stream of the event. We saw some threes, we saw some ones, saw some zeros. So there's no way they could be let down because they had zero expectations. I wouldn't be surprised if even some of the people that said zero were kind of let down. I think that there were things that I liked. There were some things that I was interested in. But overall, like if we say, I wouldn't say I was underwhelmed. I would say it's kind of close to the score I gave it. I would say that overall is probably like a 4.5 out of 10. And I gave it like a 6 was my hype rating. I will say that I still had a lot of fun hanging out with y'all. So that part was cool. But yeah, in terms of the actual broadcast itself, I was kind of I was like, yeah, there's some things here that I like, but there was nothing like, if we're talking about like comparing it to the state of play that Sony put on last week that we talked about, like that was like a 10. We gave that a 10. Like that one was an all-timer for state of play when keeping it on the expectations of the state of play. And we could talk about expectations for the Summer Game Fest itself when it's trying to replace E3. You're always going to have like, hey, this thing is going to replace this other thing that's always massively hyped. Even if it's underwhelming in recent years or recent times that it's had it, one time it was like one of the highest things that like people were like, oh, video games, oh, it's summer, E3, let's go. Like it was kind of whelming. I was not super impressed. Like I said, I think out of 4 out of 10, I'd give this a 4. So it's still, even though I felt like I tempered my expectations, you could argue I didn't temper them enough.
I would definitely say I'm on that same scale you said at the end. I had tempered my expectations as much as I could ahead of time because of what Geoff Keighley said. And I said, I think I said going into it that I was like trying to hold it at like a 6.5, as you kind of talked about. And then as the show went on, I think it was like fairly early in the show. I think it was like half an hour in or maybe 40 minutes in. I made a mention where I was like, is it weird that like I'm not really into this right now? And I remember us kind of like having this like small debate about it, and I was like, oh, it could just very well be, I think that there's like a lot of stopping points in the middle of the show, or there's like too much discussion, or it could just be that the games themselves are not grabbing my attention. But as it continued, that continued to be the same thing. It continued to just be this feeling of, I'm not really feeling this. And I feel like that is where I maybe didn't temper my expectations enough to get a sense of what's going on. Because even the games that they showed off, like the big games, so like using like Gotham Knights, Saints Row, Midnight Suns, none of those really got me excited either. It wasn't like they showed off some really compelling gameplay or a significant portion of something to really grab your attention. There were some release dates in there as well, but just not anything that made me go, oh, wow. Right? I don't think I ever said that throughout the show, besides the one moment with the Callisto Protocol's demo where it was just, the main character getting put into a grinder, basically. It was like, oh, God, But other than that, I don't... He
got his meat grinded.
I don't recall, like, really saying that. And then the kickoff, or the go-home effect. You said in last week's episode that the lasting image is what stands out the most, and so you really need to make sure that you nail that lasting image.
The main event.
It was The Last of Us Part 1, but I feel like, so let me just say this part real quick. The thing that was eliminated, or that was leaked ahead of time, was that it was The Last of Us Part 1 remake. Okay. So like I was hoping that wouldn't be the ending thing, and it was. But even if it wasn't the last thing, or even if it didn't leak, excuse me, the way that they rolled out that final part felt so underwhelming. It didn't feel like oh man, we got to like talk about this. And I feel like part of that was conveyed because it did leak early. Geoff Keighley and Nick Druckmann, the co-president of Naughty Dog, made mention of it, said, hey, let's talk about this thing that's been talked about on Twitter earlier, and it's you guys are making The Last of Us Part 1 remake. And it's like, why even make mention of that? Like, you should still make it, like, try to be hype or something, and it wasn't there. They didn't deliver a feeling of finality to the show. I think it was in our chat, one of our friends, Ronnie, said, well, that felt abrupt. And I'm like,
yeah,
I agree.
It was just like kind of like they just stood there and it's like, okay, bye. We're like, oh,
yeah. So like I would give it, I hate being this stingy,
cynical,
and on things. Yes, and cynical, as you said. But I would give it like a 2 or a 3.
Sure.
Like, and it sucks to have that, because I feel like I've said it before at most showcases that even a middling showcase can be like a 5, right? And that's just all you got to do is show off some good games, some games that catch your attention, and it's like cool. And they did. They showed off some cool games that I was like, oh, this looks interesting. This looks interesting. But there wasn't enough moments that made me go, oh, I want to check this out, right? There was, oh, that looks interesting, but not, man, I want to check that out. I'll keep my eye on that game. And that's how I just felt overall throughout the showcase.
Yeah, so a couple of things. One, I think the biggest issue is we didn't really have any like major reveals that we didn't know about. I guess The Last of Us 1 remake for PS5, which in my opinion, so if you're used to the original Last of Us style, maybe, or like you like kind of like the more like comic looking art, maybe it's like, I thought it looked stunning personally. I thought it looked stunning. I thought it looked really good. Agreed. But it didn't feel like it felt very disjointed, everything they were showing. Like you said, there was a lot of stopping and going because they had so many interviews. So again, we can't really compare it to a state of play, but necessarily, because they're separate things. It's like we were talking, like I remember in a different podcast that we did, state of play versus Nintendo Direct. You know, they're not the same thing. It's Sony Showcase is closer to what Nintendo Direct is. But that state of play last week, it was 2835 is what the YouTube, that was what I was searching, typing, you heard me earlier. The state of play, 2835 was the duration. That did not feel like 30 minutes watching that, like at all. Like, it's like when you go into a movie theater and you know a movie's 2 hours long, you come out and you're just like, wow, that felt like it went by really quick. Or if you're watching a wrestling event, and it's like a 2.5, 3 hour pay-per-view, and you get done, I'm like, man, that didn't feel like any time at all. This felt every bit of like the 1 hour, 50 minutes that the whole thing was. So before we continue, I got to ask you, because Kyle brought up a point that kind of interested me. You knew about this spoil. Was it just The Last of Us 1 remake, or was it the, did they also spoil that they were making, I guess they already revealed that they were making a TV series about it, right?
Correct. They had already revealed that a while ago.
Yeah, and so like a lot of that, and Kyle in our YouTube chat brought up a valid point. Like a lot of that was talking about that. It wasn't even talking about a video game. It was talking about things that we already knew about. And I feel like even if like you said, like, hey, there's not going to be a lot of like world premieres, like, or a lot of like new content, like the new content they showed was just like, we're going to stick world premiere on this because we're showing like 30 extra seconds of content. It's like going to the it's like getting a director's cut version of a game or movie that's like adds like 30 or 40 seconds of missing content that wasn't on there. And it's just like, okay, I'm not really interested in this. I want something new to grab on. A lot of the stuff they were talking about was like stuff we already knew about. And it kind of like some of it was cool. Like it was interesting, but it was like last week or the week before when we were going over the upcoming game releases, the new releases. And we were talking about like a lot of these were like, huh, that's interesting. I'm never going to play that. Huh, that's interesting. I'm never going to play that. And that's kind of a lot watching a lot of this. I kind of felt like, huh, that's really interesting. Huh, that's really interesting. Huh, that's really interesting. And then like immediately when it's off, it's like, okay, I don't really care about this necessarily anymore. And I feel like I'm talking a lot more critically now. even though I gave it like a 4, because I still think a lot of stuff was interesting. Like we were just like I was just saying, but like a lot of it was also just like, oh, that's cool. Let's move on to the next thing. Like
Now,
it's just
do you feel it was you're being more critical on it because you're thinking about it more, or is it going back to your tweet that you put out on Twitter, which you can go follow Pete at Plegia89, but you made a mention in a thread that I had kind of started that that basically Geoff Keighley wants Summer Game Fest to essentially replace E3, but Summer Game Fest, he wants it to be more like his SummerSlam. Like it's supposed to be like a still a premier event, but it's not quite the premier event of WrestleMania using type of thing. His in his version, Game Awards. Do you feel like that is starting to trickle into your head too? Is that the fact that this was supposed to, in a sense, not trying to say it actually is, but in a sense, trying to replace E3, and this is what we got delivered to us?
Yeah, and so I think there's a little bit of that, but we also got to remember E3's kind of been like underwhelming kind of in recent developments too, partly because like some developers have pulled out because they think it's just not worth it. They'll just do their own thing. But I don't think that's the only reason. I think part of it is also like I'm hearing your opinions. I'm seeing some of the opinions in our YouTube chat and just kind of like thinking it over. Like, you know, like, yeah, the things were cool, but it's kind of like a yeah, but kind of instance. But yeah, like, so we dabbled a little bit a few minutes ago about expectations. And like you were saying, like Geoff Keighley wants, it's pretty clear, I think. I mean, he's not come outright said it, but I think it's pretty clear if he had the opportunity, he would supplant E3 with Summer Games Fest. I think that's pretty clear. I think we can agree with that. Which, you know, if that's what he wants to do, fine. Like, I'm not like begrudging him for it, even though I really like E3 and I prefer it stick around. But like for a lot of years, E3 was like a lot, like anybody that was like above the level of casual gamer, and even casual gamers were like locked in on like news, like even if they weren't like, so this happens in anime conventions, where like even if you're not like super into anime, like you might see stuff trickle on media during certain times of the year. 4th of July weekend with Anime Expo is like one of the biggest ones of the year. Late May is usually Anime Central. In Chicago. I don't know if that's happening this year at the same time, or this happened this last year. Acon in the DC area, I believe, is one of them too. Like you'll just randomly hear like a bunch of announcements of like, oh, this manga is getting translated. Oh, this light novel's coming over here. Oh, these animes are going to release on Crunchyroll in fall or winter or whatever during those seasons. And so like, even if you weren't like above the level of casual fan, you probably heard like, oh man, this new game's coming out on, and you heard it directly from E3, even if you heard it through a pipeline of something else, you know? And that was a thing that happened. And I don't feel like anybody that was like not sort of aware of video games is going to be like looking at this particular stream, not necessarily other streams, because like we talked about, State of Play was technically part of the Summer Games Fest. This is just like the kickoff show, basically. But the kickoff show itself, which you would think is kind of like the premiere event, and maybe that's the problem. Now kind of talking about it a little bit, I'm kind of like, I guess, kind of reasoning myself with this at this point. Like, maybe that's a problem. Like, we're looking at this as the kickoff show should be like the main event. And the kickoff show maybe is just like, hey, we're kind of like promoting all these other little developer things, and they're going to show their cool stuff like Sony did with the State of Play. We got the Xbox Bethesda on Sunday. You're going to co-stream a few things in the next several days, things like that. I'm not saying that's the right way to go about it, but maybe that's what it kind of is supposed to be. But if they're going to do that, they have to find a format to make that obvious, because the way they promoted this Summer Games Fest kickoff show is you would think it is kind of like a big reveal show in terms of like, oh, this maybe not brand new video games, but at least new content, which, I mean, we got some new content from the Callisto Protocol. We got some other new content from a couple other things, but like, it didn't feel like anything that was just like, it didn't feel like, you know, Final Fantasy 16. And I mean, we got confirmation of one of the characters that was leaked for Street Fighter 6, which confirms like maybe that leak is actually super legit now, which we all kind of thought, but you know, that kind of thing. But it's like, a lot of the stuff is just like, if your object is to promote streams of other groups, then you have to do a better job of that, because this didn't do a good job of that either. So like,
Agreed.
what are we doing here if that's the case? Like, what is the point? Basically, Geoff Keighley, what is the point of the Summer Game Fest kickoff show? And then how do you build to make it work to do that goal? It's
So
essentially what it does. It feels very disjointed in that regard.
So before I go into my thoughts, let me give you kind of a hypothetical situation, or basically a situation for you to kind of give your input. As you said that you felt, if maybe the kickoff live show was supposed to be this show that helps with getting the other events more looks, right? As you said, like the other events have their bigger things. How would you do that without trying to overhype your own event? Because he has established Summer Game Fest again, trying to, in a sense, take over E3. But like, does that mean you have the kickoff show be like something very small, and you really make it very small? Because 2 hours to kind of show not much is rough.
So what I would do is, first off, it would be the first thing that everybody sees. It would be like, I would probably try to keep it under an hour, or around at most an hour. I would have it before anything else airs. So you would get whatever developers are saying, like, hey, we're going to put the Summer Game Fest logo on our thing as well. You can be a part of it. It'd be the first thing. And then you spend like 5 or 6 minutes maybe on some trailers or stuff like that for like PlayStation or Sony. And then be like, hey, on June 2nd, Sony's going to do their state of play. You're going to see a lot more. You're going to see some of this stuff and a lot more other stuff being revealed. Then you go like another 10 minutes of like Xbox Bethesda or whatever, and be like, hey, Sunday, June 11th or June 12th or whatever the date is, Xbox Bethesda stream is this day. All right. Now, if you somehow got Nintendo, show like they did basically a Switch recap, essentially. Show that, and then be like, all right, we got more reveals on the Nintendo Direct. And you kind of do that. And I think if you do that, because then you have like 6, 7 things where like, bam, you're getting thrown this, bam, you're getting thrown that, bam, you're getting thrown that. And then you could like do like a sit down interview with some of these things. Cause then like, if you want to break it up, like say you do like 2 or 3 of these things at the beginning, and then like halfway through, like, all right, we're going to talk about Last of Us. This is going to be the Last of Us show. So we do like a 15-minute thing on The Last of Us, and then you finish out with like, a couple other like developers that you're having, Naughty, or maybe you would go from Last of Us into like a Naughty Dog new thing, and then like finish off with like, Acta Blizzard or something, like Activision Blizzard or EA throwing like their thing, and then be like, hey, these two have their developer thing, like, on these things. And then but you got to promote that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And this is definitely not the way to do it, because like you said, they were making this feel like this was like the show that you had to see out of all of them. Like it felt like it was supposed to be like the opening ceremony. It feels like it should be the opening ceremony of like a convention. And it felt like this is supposed to be like, the Saturday night main event that everybody was supposed to go see if you like had like bought like a major pass for like the convention. And I don't think it delivered on that regard.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I think it's a hard balance, as Kyle is bringing up in the chat. People don't watch and skip out, right? You want to try to get that kind of mindset in there. But I agree with you. If this was before State of Play, I maybe am not as upset with how things were with the showing. But again, you let State of Play go before you. You already build State of Play as a summer game show. It literally opened up with a title card in the State of Play that says, hey, like a Summer Game Fest thing. It was in the corner of PlayStation's stream. So it's not even like it was in previous years where this did happen, where Summer Game Fest would be like, hey, this is a Summer Game Fest event. But if you watched the stream of said company, so using Ubisoft, because Ubisoft Forward event was the one that it really stuck out. If you went to a Ubisoft stream, you had no idea that this was a Summer Game Fest event, because Ubisoft stream had nothing to indicate that it was a Summer Game Fest event. But if you went to Summer Game Fest's YouTube, or of course in this case the Game Awards YouTube, they would have Summer Game Fest like all splattered about. State of Play actually put Summer Game Fest in there, making it clear this is a Summer Game Fest event. Why let that go first if this is the kickoff show?
Yes.
This literally is labeled as kickoff show. And that's my biggest problem with it. I also understand that you have this issue, right, where if you don't tease enough for people to check out, they're not going to check out the kickoff show. But I agree with you. The way that kind of you described it is I really feel the kickoff show should be like some announcements here and there, maybe nothing major, except for like the very end of the kickoff show could be something major. But you got to keep it under an hour. I think the sweet spot is half an hour to 45 minutes. It's the kickoff show. If you want it to be the kickoff show,
yeah.
Exactly. Make it really short. Don't make it this 2-hour event where it felt like it was just full of fluff. And even with them setting expectations this year, it just still felt full of fluff.
Yeah, it felt like they were just trying to fill time. And going back to like what our YouTube chat is saying. Like if Geoff Keighley wants people to watch this show and like actually watch it as like its own thing and not like just a kickoff show, he's gonna have to do something different, because if this is what people are supposed to expect, they're not gonna watch it anyway. Like, what are they gonna show up for? Like, cool, I'll watch like a bunch of this stuff that I don't really care about or was already announced, and it's not like adding anything new except maybe like an extra 15 seconds of the trailer. Like, okay, cool, fine. Like, you know, the Callisto Protocol gameplay was like interesting, like we were saying, but like, you know, you could probably find that on YouTube if you're really that interested, and like watch that 5 minutes of it or 3 minutes or whatever they showed.
Well,
and
let's get into this
Game Pass game thing anyway.
Let's get into this next topic that I kind of wanted to discuss, which is we're going to start off with the bad and then end with the good, as you said before, right? When the lasting thing is what's going to stick the most. So let's start with the bad. Across Summer Game Fest, what would you say was the low light or the worst moment to you? Was there any trailer or any announcements or how a certain thing was presented that you just was like, oh God, like this is not good?
The Dwayne Johnson thing was kind of not only, I don't know if I'd say it bad, but it was definitely random and kind of like, I don't know what the purpose it was. Like, they weren't even like saying like, hey, by the way, Black Adam's coming out in theaters. We have a game trailer that we're showing for a Black Adam thing, a Black Adam game or another DC game. Like they even had like a hero game involved, Marvel Midnight Suns. I understand that's Marvel, not DC, but they could have like had him like, you know, like maybe not had Dwayne Johnson himself because it was a DC thing, but like guided that scripted so they were going from the Black Adam thing, which also he's randomly promoting Zoa Energy. I don't know if Zoa was a sponsor of Summer Game Fest.
I did not like that.
I was just like, I don't understand what the point of that is. Like, was that like, but like you could have scripted it so like it goes from Black Adam. All right, we also got this other hero game, Marvel Midnight Heroes or whatever, or Midnight Suns rather, and then show that off. And then it's like kind of like there's a little flow there. Instead, we went to like Outriders, World Slayer, Endgame. And then we went to a Switch update. We started that with a routine, which I had written down here, and I didn't write any extra notes, so I'm kind of blanking on what that was.
Routine was the one with the subway and the robot. Yeah.
The Terminator. Okay, yeah.
The one that was announced apparently 10 years ago and just now
just coming back.
Came up. Real quick before you go into further depth, this is I made mention right before we started this stream. I was like, okay, I'm going to mention this later. There's a user on Twitter. Of course, you can follow him on Facebook and Instagram as well. But Cheap Ass Gamer is where I get a lot of my gaming deals from. He tweeted out in the middle of the show on The Rock. He screenshotted it and he said, watching The Rock promote everything except video games is free. And I loved that tweet, found it hilarious because it felt like that. Why was that even there? I get that The Rock is a pull. we know it as wrestling fans, and of course people.
But they didn't promote he was going to be there, did they?
They did. They did ahead of time. That's the thing.
That was smart then. That was smart then.
He is a pull, right? People tune in. He's such a charismatic person. He's a great icon. Those that love wrestling, of course, always are drawn towards him. He's great in movies. He's done a lot of good movies.
Furious.
Yeah. But it just felt like so out of place because yes, first there's him in the weight room with this shirt off. Like I know we made the joke about the terms of service, aspect, but just still, like it was just instantly when I saw that I was like, okay, this feels weird, right? And he like made this whole mention of like, oh, I'm in my lovely domain, the nice, sweaty, smelly domain, and I'm like, what is this? And then like in the middle of him talking is like, oh yeah, and here's my energy drink, the fastest growing energy drink there is. I'm like, where are we going with this? This makes no sense. And then as you said, it ended with the trailer for Black Adam, which Black Adam looks really cool. I'm not a huge movie person, so I'll be honest, I likely won't end up watching it, but it looked cool. But I agree with you. Why was there not like a tie with like, at the very least, and this sounds really weird, but like, why was there not a tie at the very least of like, oh yeah, and starting tomorrow you can get the Black Adam skin in Fortnite or something, right? Like to tie it to why it should be there, except for I'm just gonna promote the movie and my energy drink. I didn't like that.
So really quick before you continue on, this is something that is jarring specifically, especially to people that work in television, especially you, Jeremy, because you worked in the news department and you had to script shows. People might not realize this just looking, but there is a way to schedule things that give a show an ebb and flow.
Yes.
And even if you'll watch something and like, wow, this feels really out of place and feels really jarring. I don't understand why while you're watching it. When we do this kind of thing for a living, that's why it feels jarring, because it's just randomly there and there's nothing tying the room together. And we talked about how well they did as State of Play was doing that last week. There a lot about this week was not tying the room together very well, and a lot of that was a stop and go too. So
yeah.
Then was there anything else you wanted to say about the Dwayne Johnson?
Oh no, not about Dwayne Johnson.
But I just wanted to give a little tidbit, like why we were so focused on that, or part of the reason anyway. It's just like as TV people, like that's something you learn pretty quickly. Like, oh, there's a reason why things happen the way they are.
Oh yeah, and just to give extra context to that aspect, right? Like, you get taught that, especially as a producer, someone who like puts shows together, how to make the show flow. And I was a reporter, but I also did producing and various things. But you yourself, you were never a producer, but you're a director, which also does the same thing, right? And feel that flow. And so, yes, when something is so jarring, it is so obvious, and it feels like it makes my skin crawl, when I see it.
If you think it's bad for you, imagine somebody that knows how it's supposed to be, and so it's multiplied by like 10.
Yes, it was so bad. And so then going off of it, my worst thing, and I made mention of it during our stream, was the Callisto Protocol trailer. Geoff did this last year, and I hoped that he would learn from this, and he hasn't. He continues to show trailers we've already seen, and then slaps world premiere on it because it added 10 seconds, as you said. I hate that. Stop it. I don't want to be mean. I really like Geoff. I really like what he does. I love the idea behind Summer Game Fest, but just I don't like this. It feels like a bait and switch. It feels so much like a bait and switch, and Geoff doesn't need to do that. And when he does it, it just drives me nuts. So don't do that. You could have easily cut off the Callisto Protocol trailer before the gameplay trailer, because of the fact you had the gameplay trailer. Just make mention of it when you're going to the trailer. Hey, you got to see the trailer at State of Play, a Summer Game Fest event. If you haven't seen it already, go check that out. But here's an in-depth look of the gameplay. boom, gameplay. You just saved yourself a bunch of time. Makes the Summer Game Fest not feel so long, and you still get a good segue into the gameplay. I just don't get it. You know, we made mention of it last week. It's a similar gripe I have with PlayStation. Yeah, you show off Spider-Man Remaster is coming to PC, but then you hold off until your blog that Miles Morales is also coming to there. Stop it.
Yeah.
Like, that's just not, it does not make sense. Stop doing it. Just make it flow, right? Okay. Mm-hmm. So that was my biggest gripe. But what was your favorite thing that you saw at Summer Game Fest?
So I have a couple of them. I'll nail them down really quick. Guile was revealed to have been on the Street Fighter 6. That was really cool. That led off the event. I actually thought that was a decent way to lead off the event. Maybe not the best, but it was really cool because it was like really quick. We saw some gameplay. He was part of the leak, as we mentioned earlier. So kind of almost shadow confirming that leak's probably pretty accurate. I don't know. I assume the design was really close, if not exactly like it was in the art that was revealed. I didn't actually compare it myself, so this is a personal thing. If you listen to our top 5 underrated or top 5 games with the least fanfare episode, two-parter a few weeks back, Flashback coming in 2022. Really looking forward to that. Hope that's really cool. And then I'm going to talk about this now, even though it's technically on our schedule for later in the show under their upcoming releases. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Shredder's Revenge. I was surprised when I was watching the preview because I'd not heard they were remastering this game, that you got to play April O'Neil and as Master Splinter. You also get to play as Casey Jones. So you get to play with more than just the Ninja Turtles. That's really dope. I really hope that game's really cool. The remaster looks sweet. And I was a real big fan of that. I was like, I wasn't jumping out of my seat, but when I saw that, I was like, no, that's so dope. And then you mentioned that they're doing the Pizza Hut personal pan pizza, which I didn't even know they made Pizza Hut personal pan pizzas anymore. So those are kind of like the 3 things that I was just like, yeah, hell yeah.
I will agree with the Casey Jones aspect as a kid who, like, I don't follow TMNT much now, but like as a kid who loved Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, seeing Casey Jones was awesome. And then yes, because of that announcement recently that the physical versions will include a coupon for a personal pan pizza at Pizza Hut, I love the nostalgia factor that has with it. So like, yeah, I'm totally on board with it. For myself, Witchfire, that looked really cool. I know that our friend Ronnie put in chat that it was basically Medieval Destiny, but Medieval Destiny worked for me.
If you're copying Destiny, that's probably a good thing to reinvent or recopy, to be fair.
Yeah, Medieval Destiny was definitely works for me. And I also really enjoy the fact that we got to see a little bit more of Nightingale. I will say, because my next topic, I'm going to add real to it. It's going to also be in my next topic, but I was glad to see some more things with Nightingale. And then while we did not get, I guess, like an extended look of it, I did actually like Routine. I thought Routine looked pretty cool when it comes to that cinematic trailer. So I'm interested in what that one goes. Hopefully it's not gonna disappear for 10 years again, because apparently it was announced 10 years ago, so hopefully we get a little bit more, but I'm gonna keep my eye on it. So my last topic I want to ask you before we move on to reminiscing real quick about one more game, what was the event or trailer or announcement that you just felt very mixed about, that you maybe didn't love, but you also didn't necessarily hate? Was there anything that kind of just stood out and you were just like, okay?
We didn't talk about Goat Simulator 3. That was actually really rad.
Actually, let me go back. The thing I loved the most was Goat Simulator 3. Goat Simulator, Kyle put it in chat. His favorite thing was Goat Simulator 3. I agree, Kyle. It was really good. Using Dead Island 2's trailer to end up promoting your own game was amazing. I loved it.
It was fantastic. Yes. I don't know. So the kind of the biggest one for me was Geoff Keighley even mentioned it like 3 games after I mentioned it on our stream. there were a lot of like space centric games and a lot of like space horror centric games of being like locked into like a space station kind of thing. And by like the third or fourth one, I was kind of like, okay, this is starting to like kind of get boring because I feel like I'm seeing the same thing. Like there were twists on them. Like routine was different from Fort Solis, was different from the Callisto project. Like, you know, but like after a while, it's like, okay, these are all kind of like the same general idea. What do we like? Why are there so many of these specific games? I guess that was the one where it was kind of like, I know it's not a specific trailer, but I was kind of like, okay, we just saw like 4 of these. Why are we seeing a 5th one now? It was definitely kind of weird to me.
I think it's essentially what you're kind of saying too, right? Is that it just felt so similar. It may have been different, but they were so similar that
There
you're
were
like,
so many similarities that like the differences were less like out there as opposed to the similarities.
For me, it was Nightingale, and I hate saying that because I am so looking forward to that game. When it got announced at the Game Awards, it was my favorite announcement at the Game Awards. I've been following it since. I signed up for the newsletter, and when I got the email from the newsletter earlier saying that there was going to be gameplay, there was going to be a new trailer at Summer Game Fest, I made a video on it and was like, dude, I want to make a video on it because I've been so excited for this. I've been wanting to cover it. I should make a video on it. And I just feel so underwhelmed by that trailer that's why I feel so mixed, because I was like, cool, I got to see more gameplay. Like I got to see another look at it, but it wasn't much. And especially, and maybe it was just my higher hopes, but I was just hoping that I would see a tease at least to like some sort of a beta or an alpha test that is coming up, because again, it's going to launch in early access in Q4, 2022. Yeah. But they said that there is going to be some alpha tests between now and then. And I subscribed to the newsletter. I haven't seen anything, announced.
So it's a little scary. It's a little scary being halfway through the year. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I was really hoping for it. I was wanting some things. And so, yeah, that was definitely the most mid thing. So final thoughts before we move on. Is there any parting things you want to say about Summer Game Fest?
I just hope a lot of these games deliver on the promises that they are sending out. A lot of the games look pretty sweet, even if they're not games I'm necessarily going to pick up or super interested in. So, like One Piece Odyssey, like I hope that game hits. I would love to try that one, but it's really hard to get it's really hard to get those anime games at a decent price. A lot of those are $60 and they don't move, man. The Samsung cloud streaming was actually kind of interesting. Interesting in the sense of like, a smart TV kind of like having access. So you don't necessarily need, it didn't seem like you needed like a game system. You just have the TV itself and you could just like buy off the store and stuff. Like I said, we've talked down a lot about what was going on in this, on Summer Games Fest. And I think the takeaway is there were a lot of cool things here, but it was the stuff that we already kind of knew. Mm-hmm. And like, even if you're tempering expectations, when you have a 2-hour program, the worst thing that you can do for a long program is have it feel longer than it does. And like you said, I understand we started the stream like 20 minutes early, but like you even mentioned it, like you said, a half hour in. This feels like this has been going on a long time. And it was on for like another like hour and 15 minutes after that.
Yeah.
And that was like 30 minutes in. So the worst thing is like feeling like you're just waiting. And, I hope they fix that issue. But, we'll see. I assume they're going to try this again next year. So,
Yeah. You always hope every year you build on something and you make it better. And I just want to end it basically with a final note from what Kyle wrote here in the chat. And I completely agree with it. And it's basically something that we said too. When it comes to the Summer Game Fest and Geoff Keighley with this, he said, that's where his issue is. He wants to be the big show, but also the kickoff. You can't do both. And I agree.
You can, but they can't be the same show. It's one or the other.
Exactly. And that's the big thing. So with that being said, let's move to our final part of the show before we get to, of course, our upcoming games releases. But It is the 1 year anniversary of One More Game podcast. The podcast launched exactly 1 year ago today. So, of course, as of recording, June 9th. And at that time, of course, it was me and my friend Isaac Campos doing the show. And then as time went on, of course, he got very busy with work and had to step away. And then that's when my other really good friend, Pete, joined with us. So Pete, I got to ask you, of course, you haven't been here for the whole year, but I do know that you've, of course, been listening to the podcast. Maybe not as often when you weren't a host, but you still were listening. And now, of course, as a host, you are here every week. What does making it to 1 year mean to you for the One More Game podcast and yourself?
It means, well, for the podcast in general, it means, a lot of hard work is paying off. Look, I'm not going to lie to you, we're still working to try to fix out the kinks, even though we're a year in, I don't know how much success you were expecting a podcast like this to have. So I hope it's at least reaching that, if not exceeding it. But there's a lot more work to do, but, and this is not to be negative on it. 1 year is amazing. Most things don't last a year. That is people have to really understand that. One of the things it's kind of like when people are surprised when you talk to them about how things actually last. Like the average NFL player's career lasts less than 2 years. You wouldn't think that because all the names you hear all the time, they're always there. Tom Brady's still playing. Aaron Rodgers has been there for 15 years. A lot of players. But when you get down to the nitty gritty, the average player, most people aren't Aaron Rodgers. They're not Tom Brady. They're not, John Elway and Dan Marino when they were playing. They're not Russell Wilson. They're the average person that's they barely make the roster spot. They're the 45th player on the team. They're on the practice squad. Sometimes they get called up. Their careers don't last long. A successful manga goes a year. It has a year serialization. People don't realize because the ones you think of are the One Pieces, the Bleaches, the Dragon Ball Z's, the Dragon Balls, the series that have gone on for years and years. Getting a year is a huge milestone. It is a huge accomplishment because it means, if nothing else, you stuck to it. You kept going. Not every week was as easy as as other weeks. Some weeks were really tough. Maybe not even because of the podcast, or maybe because of the work you were doing on the website. Maybe outside factors were struggling. That kind of thing. There's a bunch of different factors, but so reaching a year, I think, is a huge accomplishment, a huge goal. And you know what? We could keep on pushing, we keep on going. I think we could be very successful. And even as successful as some of the all-time great sequels like Spider-Man 2 and Empire Strikes Back, things like that. Those are the sequels we can look to be. And I'm really humbled that I was able to be a part of that. And for me personally, I'm really humbled I was able to be a part of that. I'm really thankful that Isaac was helping you out as long as he did and reaching the goals. And I'm glad I was able to help you out and do at least a little bit in part to try to keep your podcast a success. So
I really appreciate that. And yeah, the reaching this year, I mean, I tweeted out about it earlier, but in all honesty, I never really expected us to last a year. As I love putting this podcast together, it's something that when I talk with my wife about, maybe I'm stretching myself too thin, maybe I'm doing too much and I need to kind of really hone in on things. The first thing that I always say right afterwards is I'm not giving up the podcast. I love putting this together. It's as you said, it's not always a hit in the park. I mean, I will, of course, pull back the curtain a little bit. About 4 months in, we were at an average listening of about 25 listens at a time. And then we hit a 3-week stretch where we barely hit 10 listens. And in that 3-week stretch, I was like, I should stop. No one's tuning in. We're not going anywhere, right? But I loved doing this podcast so much, so it really tore me up, and it just got to the point where, you know, my wife said, you know, people may be busy, and just keep doing, and we'll see what happens. And sure enough, right after that happened, we had an episode hit. I think it was like 100 listens, and those episodes that were at 12 listens before jumped up to about the average, if not a little bit more. And so it was one of those things where it was like, yeah, you know, as always, you hit hard times and you want to give up because you're like, you know, it's not working. But it just, the podcast has been such a enjoyment factor for me, not only because I get to just talk about video games, which is obviously what I absolutely love and enjoy doing, but I get to talk with my closest friends doing it. Obviously, it was Isaac for a long time. Yeah, it was Isaac for a long time, and then now it's you, right? And one of my best friends, we live together. Obviously, you know, we live in different states now, but we've never lost touch. We continue to reach out, and if anything, this episode or this show has brought us even closer because we get to talk every week now, where it was before it was like we'd talk every maybe 2 weeks or 3 weeks or every month, depending on how things were going. So it's been such a blast doing this, and I am so happy to hit 1 year. Obviously, that's why I got, for those in the video views, I got all the balloons and the hat, because I was just like, you know what, as you said, not many things like this can last a year, and we did it. And that's
hell, the other One More Game podcast that competes with us, I think they only lasted a few weeks. So there you go. Boom.
So Pete, do you have an episode or a topic or discussion that stands out to you, that sticks out in your mind?
For the ones that we've done together, I think the Activision Blizzard one was probably, I know that was only like our second one. I think that was one of my favorite ones, because you do the first one and that was really cool. But then the second one, I was kind of like, okay, I have an idea of how the first one went. Now I kind of want to make it better. What can I do to actually improve it? And y'all know I ramble. I'm sorry. It'll happen. I tried reining in a little bit, you know. Sometimes it works, sometimes it don't. But I think like that was like probably like one of the first ones is like, okay, even if you ramble, as long as we're having a good conversation, it's not as bad. It's not that big, necessarily that big of a deal. The worst thing is rambling when you're trying to sound like you're talking for a thought. So that's the one thing I tried to like, especially like focus on. And I think that was the biggest one. In terms of just favorite episodes in general, I love listening when you have other people on, partially because I don't have to do the episode, so I get a week off. I mean, I'm not going to lie. But in general, like I love hearing like Isaac talk. I love hearing, shit, I can't remember some of the other people now. Yeah, Sharif is awesome. Isaac is awesome. I love hearing their comment because it gives me a viewpoint. One of the things I love about podcasts, listening to other people talk, listening to, you know, show interviews. It's part of the reason why I like Bomani Jones, The Right Time. It's part of the reason why I love listening to his podcast. I walk away feeling like I've learned something. I walk away feeling like I'm smarter. I feel more intelligent. And so hearing other people's opinions, that's like kind of like my favorite thing. And like, so when I hear your podcast and I hear Isaac and I hear Sharif and I hear, you know, other people talk about stuff that maybe like, it'll give me a viewpoint that I didn't think of. I mean, we had chat today. We took some points from not only from our Twitch stream, but also our YouTube chat. You know, Kyle and Kalwu and threw out some stuff that we talked about too. Just like, oh, that's a viewpoint I didn't consider. Because, you know, when you have more people, more voices, you know, you get to see things differently, especially from the standpoint of like people with experiences that I may not have for a variety of reasons. And those are kind of like my favorite things. So like, yeah, I mean, like I get the week off, but more so I get to like, okay, let's sit back and listen to what Sharif says. Let's sit back and listen to what Jeremy says. Let's sit back and listen to because like your interactions between you and me are different also from between you and Sharif and you and Isaac. So it's another different angle. Like, okay, what's Jeremy's take, you know, when he's got Isaac on there? Not necessarily you'd have a different take, but maybe like a different thought comes to your mind when you're talking to somebody besides me. And those things are kind of cool. And I really enjoy that part.
Yeah, I basically echo what you say on that aspect. Obviously, I don't get weeks off from the podcast, so I always, though, go back and listen to every single podcast. I do it every Friday, listening to the podcast back, not only to critique myself and see what I can improve upon, but also do exactly what you said. Sometimes in the midst of the discussion, you think of certain things and then you kind of move on from it, or you get to say it. But then when you re-listen to it back, a different thought pops into your mind, or a different avenue, a different aspect. And you're like, oh, or it's something that you just didn't actually hear during the conversation. You're like, wow, why didn't I think of that part? Or why didn't I expand on that part? So
when we were talking, sorry to interject, when we were talking about a month ago, when we were talking about that Star Wars Souls game, and they were talking about how they couldn't, we were talking about
the representation
and things. And I can't, we talked about it a few days later. I was like, one of the things I bummed out that we didn't mention is representation also normalizes the representation of people that may not meet, people of other skin colors or other different genders and stuff like that. And it normalizes that from that aspect too. And we didn't even talk about that. And that's another reason for like representation is important. But like, we didn't just think about that in the moment. And then it came to me after the fact, listening to the podcast again.
Yeah, for sure. And, it's obviously it's an easy choice, but I will say probably my favorite episodes are always the episodes that we do open discussions on a separate topic instead of doing just the news. So I kind of have a contentious top spot for, of course, top 5 favorite games and top 5 underappreciated games, which you should go both check those out in our various podcast services. Of course, we don't have video versions of that, but you should go listen to those because, yes, they're long. They're both like 2-part episodes because they're almost like 2 hours long, but they are so good in the fact of learning a little bit of insights about various video games that really appeal to us as gamers, and of course also just the center of discussions around those. Again, I made mention earlier about wanting to play Resonance of Fate. A lot of that stemmed from just doing that podcast. I did that podcast, and ever since then I'm like, man, I really want to revisit this game. I really want to go back and try it, play it again and see, does that love still sit there? So that's kind of my favorite episodes from there. But my last thing I just want to ask you before we kind of move on to the upcoming releases and, of course, close out the show is just to you, Pete. Again, you've been a listener and now a co-host. What does one more game mean to you?
We kind of already touched about it. It means connecting with one of my best friends and talking about him week to week, honestly. That's probably the biggest push to keep me coming back every week. If there wasn't one already, just trying to help you out. Just being able to talk to you a lot. And I've interacted and met, now that we got a Discord, shameless plug, talk to some of the people in there now too, and kind of gotten their takes on some various things from like video games to sports and stuff like that, and that's all really cool. Also, like I've talked about this before on the podcast, I've kind of refound a love for gaming. I would say I was in a rut before I started the podcast. I kind of like did the same things over and over again. I've dropped some games, like I don't really play card games anymore, even though I love card games, because I realized like that rut was just like not worth it after a while, and it gave me more time to do some other stuff. I'm kind of in a similar space about Genshin Impact. I haven't really played the new update yet. I think I'll go back to it at some point and actually play that update and start getting back into it, into the swing of things, because I actually really enjoy that story that they've been telling. So, but it's definitely reignited. Like I played a lot more different games this year than I have in years, and I think not just learning about the industry and stuff like that, and discussing that part as well, but like just like saying like, hey, you know what? Video games are fucking fun. You remember fun? Fun's cool, right? Fun's
fun
great.
Is cool.
Fun is cool. You heard it here first.
Heck yeah.
It's just like, but that kind of thing, like, especially after the pandemic years, man, even though I know we're still in it, but like 2020, man, you needed to pick me up. And I gotta be honest, like doing the podcast and like re-experiencing a love for video games was a really, I think I still underappreciate that aspect of it.
I totally echo that. I love, as I said, I love coming back to do the podcast every week because at the very least, even if no one listens, I still get to hang out and talk with my friend for a couple hours every week. Just shooting shit about video games. And what do we always do before the podcast? We shoot shit for a little bit. And then after the podcast, we always end up shooting shit probably longer than we should because we're like, we got other things we got to do. But we're going to just continue talking. And then we're like, oh, yeah, we actually should go do those other things now.
We got to go adult again. Sucks.
So, Pete, I have a little surprise for you.
Aww.
I'm going to kind of leave it up to your choice. But you don't know, of course, what these are. Do you want an RPG or do you want a roguelike game?
I guess I'll go RPG.
RPG. Well, man, again, as a thank you for all the work that you have done to help out with the podcast and just being here, of course, for being such a loyal friend. I am sending you a game for. Hold on, I can't type while I'm thinking, so thank you for
typing is
being
hard.
here with me on the podcast and as a friend. I really hope you like this game. Let me just say it. Let me just say it that way. But you are getting a copy of don't use my money. Use this money.
Don't use my money.
Well, no, I've tried it. I have some extra funds, and I'm like, don't use my extra funds.
For sure.
I just want you to use my credit card.
Give me your credit card. I won't do nothing with it, I swear.
Okay, apparently I put in the wrong number, so give me a second. Oh, that's what it is. I was off by one.
This is live on stream.
This is live on stream. This is live.
We started out by me not being able to open a bottle, and we end by you not being able to put in your credit card or whatever.
Well, it was the security code. I was off by one number.
Okay, it's just a security code. Start off by me not opening a bottle, and you can't end with you not typing.
Can it go? All right.
Oh,
there it goes.
Hell yeah. Cool. I'll give you an update.
So
I'll play it and give you an update.
We're going to put it out there. You get a copy of Resonance of Fate 4K HD version on Steam.
You were just talking about it. I was actually looking and seeing on Steam actually just a little bit ago. Literally like 5-10 minutes ago.
Yeah, exactly. But again, that is a big thank you. So now I'm also envious of you because I didn't buy it for myself, but I had already planned ahead of time that I was going to give you something, and I figured this was something from our discussion.
Wait, did I just steal your game from you? I mean, I feel bad. I don't steal
in a sense, yeah, you did. You should feel bad, you jerk.
What the hell, man?
All right. Anyway, that is here live on the show. And as Cobalt said, love that game. So there you go. So you already have two people commending you to go and play it, and now you own it. So you have no excuse.
Yeah, I'll give you an update next week on what we played.
Yeah, exactly. But anyway, when will I own that game? Who knows? But will you be possibly buying that game? There is upcoming games for you to spend your hard-earned cash on, and I'm going to tell you all about it today. And it starts with Friday, June 10th, Demon Slayer, Kimetsu no Yaiba, The Hinokami Chronicles for Switch, Mario Strikers Battle League for Switch, The Quarry, PS5, Xbox Series, PS4, Xbox One, and PC, Metal Max Xeno Reborn for PS4, Switch, and PC, Mediocre World Actor Badge and Dagger for PC. Saturday, June 11th, we have Rumbleverse is actually going to have their cross-platform test on PlayStation, Xbox, and PC. Go download it. Of course, that is free to do. Tuesday, June 14th, we have Hand of Merlin for PS5, Xbox Series, PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC. Wednesday, June 15th, we have Nemesis Distress for PC. Thursday, June 16th, you have Redout 2 for PS5, Xbox Series, PS4, Xbox One, and PC. Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge for PS5, Xbox Series, PS4, Xbox One, Switch, Switch and PC. Starship Troopers for Terran Command for PC. Horigyu and Friends for Switch. Cloud Gardens for Switch. Skeleton Crew for PC. Autonauts for PS5, Xbox Series, PS4, Xbox One, and Switch. Overlord Escape from Nazarick for Switch and PC. And on Friday, June 17th, you have Omari for PS4 and Switch, and Final Vendetta for PS5, Xbox Series, PS4, Xbox One, Switch, and PC. Pete, are any of these catching your eyes?
There's actually a lot of them this week where I was just like, oh, I'm actually interested. And not just interested like, oh, but I'm not going to play it. Like, I actually would like to play a lot of these games. We talked about Shredder's Revenge, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles earlier. Skeleton Crew looked really dope. Redout was kind of a cool thing. I don't know if I have an itch that I need to scratch for like racing games, but that game looked kind of sweet. Mario Strikers Battle League. I would love to pick that game up soon. It looks really fun to play with friends. And even some stuff like Starship Troopers, Terran Command, and Final Vendetta also caught my eye. And even Overlord Escape from Nazarick was kind of random on there and interesting. So there's a lot here that I was just like actually kind of into.
It's a good thing you don't have access to your bank account, or you'd be broke by all the names you listed off.
Yeah, I adult too much. I had to pay too many bills.
Yeah, exactly. For me, it comes down to The Quarry, of course. I made mention of it last week. I actually canceled my pre-order because of just my backlog of games. Well, Metal Max Xeno Reborn, I'm still really interested in that. The Meteor World Actor game, I didn't play that demo we downloaded, but I will check that one out. And then the last ones I will say is Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, as you did say. Redout 2, because I love that game. Like, I shouldn't say that game, but like what's the other game that's very similar to? What's up?
Oh, I don't know. I thought you were
it's very similar
like
to it. It's a Nintendo game. Captain Falcon is from it.
Oh God, no, I'm blanking. Captain Falcon, what are you in?
Yeah, while you look it up.
Captain Falcon game. F-Zero.
F-Zero, yes, that's what Redout reminded me of, and I loved F-Zero. So like
Captain Falcon, what are you in?
Yeah. And then the last one is Omori, because that's supposed to be really phenomenal.
Yeah,
so.
Even that one looked really dope, and I didn't even mention it. So.
Yeah, exactly. But that is all that we have for this episode. So I hope that everyone in chat enjoyed the fact that we have, of course, done this live. This is going to be something we are going to be trying to consider doing going forward. And Cobalt comes in the clutch as well. Yes, he did say F-Zero as well. But Pete, before we head off into the weekend, is there anything you want to leave our listeners with?
Have a good week. Have a good weekend. I have the next 3 days off. And you know what, Jeremy? See you back here in a year.
Wow, there's only going to be 1 year? You're gonna take a whole break for a year?
I didn't mean it that way, but yeah, I guess you could interpret it that way.
I knew what you meant, but I was just like, wow, all right.
Yeah, yeah.
I made it 1 year.
I realized after you pointed out, I was like, yeah, deuces. Hope you have a new co-host.
All right, well, we're going.
I'm putting in my reservation live on stream right now.
Well, yes, B. I will see you back next week and in a year.
Let's do another year. Yeah.
But everyone, thank you so much for tuning in here to the One More Game podcast. I've been one of your co-hosts, Jeremy Culver, a.k.a. Darcy. This has been the California Thirst Quencher, Pete Legia, and we really enjoy bringing this to you. For those that are here on YouTube, stick around because we do have a PSWF episode airing right as we're talking right now. But as always, everyone else, stay hydrated, stay healthy, stay safe.
All right.
Keep on